Yes. Mhm.
Okay. So everyone in the state received this very same email. So it came on June 5th at 10:03 a.m. So if you haven't seen that or hadn't seen it, hadn't looked at it, don't know what it is, this from hello at ncrealtors.org. That's a communication from the state, and it says form changes coming July 1st. This is what we're going to work with for the most part, the summary of residential forms. We don't really necessarily handle any auctions here. There are some property managers, but not under the KW umbrella. They do that on their own, or their own firm license, not ours. Commercial forms, if you're a commercial agent, that's a sidebar conversation. So we are going to hit residential forms today, the major changes. So if you have questions, there's a Facebook group on July 8th that's with the state. John Waite is general counsel for NC Realtors. He answers the NC Realtor hotline. There is also a link for John doing the very same thing I'm doing right now with you via North Carolina at this playlist with YouTube. So if you click on that, it takes you to YouTube. And I think that's that tab. Yeah. Can y'all see this YouTube screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So these are the forms, and this is John. It's 13 minutes, 9 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, not 3 minutes, 19 minutes, 13 minutes. So he's going through major changes on these videos in YouTube. So you certainly have access to those if you want to watch John cover the same thing. So you got several different ways to get there. Also, they do a CE class called The Road to the Perfect Contract. They're offering it on the 8th from 9 to 1 in August and October. You can join that for CE credit if you want to learn more about forms. It's a 4-hour course, and it would count for your elective this year. So I'm starting here at Summary of Residential. When you click that, it takes you here to something that looks like this. Are all the form changes.
Will you tell me whose email came from? Oops.
Hello at
I'm sorry.
Realtors.
Hello, what?
Hello at ncrealtors.org. And then the name would be NC space Realtors. But June 5th at 10:03. That's when it should have came.
Okay.
So when you click that summary of residential, it opens to this. And these highlights are all the changes. So when you click on this, they're all linked to real documents. So if I click on it, it's going to take you to the 2T, which is the offer to purchase. Can y'all see that? Offer to purchase. And changes will be highlighted in yellow. So that's what that form does for you, is go through every single form that's been changed and updates it. So got the guidelines for completing offer and purchase. You've got the buyer possession after closing. So these are all the forms that have changed for residential this year. That start July 1st. So several people have.
The Facebook link isn't working.
They can click on the link in the daily email for today, and that will work too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, I got 8 people with me.
From
9
Daniel?
people with me. So some folks couldn't get in, so she's sending out the link again. So I'm going to start there with 2T. It's the biggest change for you in residential. And I'm going to make this bigger so we can see it. Are y'all good with that? Can you see?
Mm-hmm.
So no changes until you scroll down. They're taking the word being, for time being of the essence, is being removed from everything. So it just time is of the essence. And that's in all contracts and all forms. In several different places, you'll see that being is removed. You can see here in the bottom right, that's revised 724. Nothing's really changed. here, I will say while we're in this form, several folks leave this blank or say to be determined, or because you may not know when you make the offer, but at some point you do know. So compliance is kicking this back to you to either update page 2 with whoever the attorney is going to be, or do the agreement to amend. And there's actually one of the line items on agreement to amend to change the settlement agent. So, okay, so our first one is under due diligence fee. The seller or seller's agent may direct the buyer in writing to make the due diligence fee payable to a party other than seller, as that term is defined herein on this contract, and seller agrees to be bound by such written direction. So what that means is typically today you write the due diligence money to the seller. So what may happen is, or what you can do now is somebody mute.
Oh, is that?
That helped. Okay. You can unmute if you got a question, just it kills the feedback. So in a like an heir situation, if I were the executor for an estate, for the Corey estate, and heaven forbid something happened to Tammy and she's passed away, there's heirs in Tammy's family, but I may be named the executor. So that due diligence could be paid to the executor, which is not necessarily one of the heirs, but it's made to someone different than the seller. So that's an example of when a name might be different in the due diligence money. Or likewise, you could make the due diligence be held at the firm. So we don't have a trust account, so you can't make it held at KW, but you could maybe some firms that do hold it, firms that hold money in their trust account, you can make it to the trust account at the firm. So that's why you'd have a different name. This one here, I'm not crazy about something that is a choice, saddling a page, but it is. So due diligence, and only check one, is either the beginning of this date until 5 p.m. and you check that box and fill out the date, or the top of this page, the period is a number of days after the effective date of signing at 5 o'clock. You see being is removed, and that's any deadline in this paragraph. So I can say either or, neither are wrong. And I see these contracts, I'll turn them in that say 45 days after acceptance, due diligence ends, settlement in 60
Great day,
days.
Keller Williams. How may I help you?
So, hey, Keenan, can you mute?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So this is an either or. So you put in an actual date, check it, or you check this one and do it a number of days. So these are numerical and that one's a date. Nothing's changed here. Keep going. Date change. Date change. I guess you see it's now 18 pages. This is changing. If you see a blue box, that's for informational purposes. So any personal property that will be a part of the sale should be identified in the paragraph above. Or if it's a red box, it's a warning. So not that you shouldn't cover both with your clients. The red is as a requirement, like warning. You have to understand what's going on here. So this is saying a warning to the buyer during the due diligence period. I get the question often is, well, due diligence has expired. Can I still have inspections? Well, yes, but you lose some of your leverage of walking away and forfeiting earnest money if you continue to inspections after the due diligence date. So what happens is under paragraph 4 and 8C in this document, it says that although the buyer may continue to investigate the property, the expiration of due diligence has allowed under paragraph 4 and 8 the buyer's failure to terminate this contract based on the seller prior to the, to deliver a termination notice to seller prior to the expiration of due diligence will constitute a waiver of any right to terminate the contract based on due diligence provided following that period, the buyer may still exercise the right to terminate. They just forfeit their earnest money. So that's basically what that says, is that you can continue to investigate. 8C is where the seller's obligation to allow you access to the property. So after the due diligence date. So that's a warning to folks. And if you've got questions, don't hesitate to either drop them in or unmute and ask me. Date change. You'll see this is changed in several documents. They've added wetlands and water to the flood hazard verbiage. You'll see it in the listing agreement. You'll see it later on in the investigation, some of the other documents. But here they've added wetland and water hazard, investigation of potential flood hazards, wetlands, or other water or riparian issues of the property and a requirement to purchase flood insurance in order to obtain a loan. So you have to disclose that if you currently, and it says that on the listing paperwork. We'll go over a little bit later. Nothing changed, nothing changed. Again, time being is removed, and it's just time of the essence, is of the essence. I will tell you while we're on this one, this is one that happens often and I see in compliance, is this is an either or. So if they have the funds to complete, that means it's a cash purchase. And you might check that, but you don't go here and say verification of cash is attached or is not attached. So don't miss boxes. This one basically with that one. So if it's not cash, it's going to be a loan, which is this one. Now, jump to page 7. There's types of loans. And it's the first loan, if it's a conventional USDA, FHA, VA, whatever that might be. Here's what the other thing folks are missing. Say if it's an 80-20 loan, conventional, and the principal amount is 80% of the offer amount, right? Well, 20% is still hanging out there somewhere. You don't know where that money's coming from. So that would be here under other funds. So the first mortgage would be a conventional for 80% of the offer price. Other funds would be the additional 20% coming from wherever, whether it be their 401k, a gift, savings, cash on hand. I don't know what that might be, but folks are missing out on where all the money is coming from. That's what I see often today as we go through compliance. So just letting you know that that option is there for you to see it. No more changes. Keep going. This is just a date change. No more changes here. Date change. No changes, which we're excited about until this paragraph. So this is 8A under payoff settlement foreign status. Here's one, as soon as this is for government compliance. I'm sorry, it's for HO. This one's HOA. What we're seeing is the HOA companies out there saying, well, I can't give you that information. It belongs to the seller. Well, that's not true. The current actual offer has something similar to this already. What they've done is made it clearer to HOAs, sellers, and attorneys who can get that information. So as soon as reasonably possible after the effective date, which means date of signature and communication back, the seller shall provide to the closing attorney all information needed to obtain in a written statement of the seller's account from any owners association or HOA management company associated with the property. The seller designates the closing attorney as seller's agent with express authority to request and obtain on the seller's behalf a statement of that seller's account. Upon request from the attorney, seller shall immediately pay any fees charged by the owners association for getting that statement. And again, kind of what was happening was it was delaying closing because the HOA companies wanted their fee for getting this information. And they were saying, oh, the seller's the only one that can get it. And it's not true. The parties of this contract have access to get that information. So this is just a clearer statement that the seller, with signing this, is given the attorney access to get this information. So hopefully that helps make it easier at closing. The other thing is as soon as reasonably possible. We're seeing it like waiting till the week before or few days before, and the HOA company's not responding because they're saying you can't get that information, who's going to pay for it, and it's delaying closings. So all right, access. This is the other one under that paragraph about inspections later on after due diligence. It says the seller allows, not limited to allowing the buyer, buyer's agent, or reps an opportunity to conduct any due diligence, any investigations, or any inspections, verify the satisfactory completion of those repairs, and conduct a final walkthrough inspection of the property. Seller includes providing existing utilities operating at the seller's cost, in connections or de-winterizing. So what you're seeing is you can't say it's after due diligence and not give someone access, because it's right here that says you will give it. Removing property, that's not anything new. Keep scrolling down. This is just a date change. Okay, government compliance. So this is a biggie, so please make sure you take note of this and understand it. Government compliances would be like any material violation of law, ordinance, not having permitted space, or government regulation like zoning, building, stormwater, impervious surface, environmental protection, and zoning. You can see all that right there in that paragraph. What's going on is, unless the seller has specifically disclosed that violation prior to the offer date or the effective date of this offer, if a buyer establishes that the violation exists, meaning they didn't know it before the date of this offer, after the effective date and prior to closing, the buyer must promptly notify the seller, and then the seller has a chance to cure that violation. Unless otherwise agreed, if the seller does not cure the violation prior to closing, the buyer may choose to accept that violation and proceed to settlement. Or if it's not remedied and they're not going to cure the violation prior to closing, they can terminate this contract. And here's the sentence: receive a full refund of earnest money deposit and due diligence fee. So that's vastly different. And it explains out exactly what, if they've not disclosed a material fact from any of these governmental compliances, it's discovered during the due diligence period or inspection period after the signing date, but it's not yet closing, the buyer must promptly notify the seller of their findings. They have a chance to fix it. If they don't fix it and they agree, it's perfectly fine to move forward. If the seller does not fix it, buyer can terminate and have a right to receive the earnest money and due diligence.
Jason, when you're
Yes.
talking about stormwater, are you talking about easements and things like that? Because we couldn't fix that. We just have to disclose it. What are you talking about that seller could fix one of these things?
Like if you had you didn't have a permit when you had your AC done, replaced, or if you built on and you didn't have a permit for the addition. So you could contact and get in compliance, or if you didn't disclose it to start with.
Okay, so
you
more or
could
less
remedy the
permitting
situation.
would be our biggest thing.
Yeah, it is. Permitting by far is the biggest. You can't change. Another example would be like the noise ordinance around the airport. That might be an issue that someone might not disclose. So if I was listing that property, I would make sure to see what the noise cone was and make sure I disclosed
Like the
that.
train in Gibsonville.
Yep. So if we find out after the fact, they can fix it. You can't fix a train. So they either have to agree to it and proceed or get their money back.
Yeah.
So this one, deed taxes and fees. A lot of people, you don't have to enter anything here because it says the deed is to be made to the buyer, which is on page 1. So unless it's made to someone other than those folks on page 1, you don't have to enter anything here. But now, often the old contract started last year, this change, you may have parties that are like say if I'm dating someone and I want that person on the deed, but it's my loan, I can put both names here to be deeded and it only be my loan at the top. But you don't have to put something here unless it's different than page 1. So just FYI while we're there. Keep going. No changes, no changes, date change. We're still no changes. Scrolling through, no changes. And this might actually be all the changes on the offer to purchase. I think it is. So what questions do you have on offer to purchase so far? I think that's it. Yep, no more changes. And Katrina, I saw your comment. I will forward you this email that came from the state.
Thank
Um,
you.
Yep, sure thing. So next up, if you go through this list, this is what major changes were. The language added to permit the buyer to pay the due diligence fee to another party. Checkboxes added. Like this is a synopsis of what was done here. This one, the guidelines for completing an offer to purchase, that changed to add the new verbiage for the seller's duty on 2T to unpair smart devices. There can be major penalties for not unpairing and spying on a new buyer. Just FYI.
No,
Um,
And Jason, sorry, this is
what was it?
Allison. I
Yeah.
have a question about the offer.
Okay.
For the part about the due diligence being able to be payable to a party other than the seller.
Yes.
For example, if a buyer wants to wire a due diligence fee, but a seller does not want to provide their wiring information, the buyer then has the option, especially with this change, to wire to the closing attorney. Is that correct?
They could. I will say the ruling for due diligence last year, the change was made that however the buyer wanted to send it, the seller had to accept it. So if you wanted to wire it as seller accepting your contract, I'd had to accept a wire. I couldn't say, I like your contract, I'm not accepting that. Because it needed to be changed if you didn't agree to it. Now under this new thing, yes, you could wire it to an attorney just like you described and still be in compliance if they agree to it. But if I wanted to Venmo it, which we've seen some of the electronic transfers, and you didn't have Venmo, then it's on you as a seller to get Venmo and to accept that payment that way.
seller upfront state how they want it or what ways they would accept.
They can. Usually that I've never seen that happen. I mean, basically they just want the money. I have seen that if there are fees to accept like if there's a wiring fee for me to accept your payment, then it's on you to pay that as the one saying that's the one I'm gonna send. So
So basically it just comes down to however buyer and seller agree to have that done. Okay.
it is. And usually the biggest thing would be if you're paying it out to someone other than named on the contract, which this allows you to do that with that new box. So,
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah.
And then
Good question.
one
question.
final question related to that new paragraph talking about how buyer can terminate and get their due diligence and earnest money back. Buildability, would something like, for example, let's say a listing advertises this home is just outside the HOA boundaries, so no HOA applies. And then you get further along, you've discovered, oh wait, the listing agent or the seller was wrong. And in fact, HOA covenants and building guidelines or rules do actually apply. Would that be covered under this paragraph?
Yeah, I think it would. I feel comfortable that it would. From the way it reads, yes, that's how I would interpret it.
Okay, thank you.
Because they didn't disclose it up front, or it was disclosed incorrectly. You discovered it during the process, and because it either wasn't disclosed or it was incorrect, then that may change the decision to purchase. And they're saying if that happens and they can't cure it or agree not to cure it, then you can get your money back.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So next one is buyer possession after close. The major change here, I'll say, is as with any possession before or after by either party, it's like the buyer moves in, buyer possession before close. Well, they find stuff wrong and they're like, oh, well, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. I don't want to buy this house. Well, that's not how this works. So you agreed to buyer possession before settlement, but it says, based on the paragraph 4, the contingency under paragraph 11 of contract relating to the condition at closing, all rights under that paragraph in contract, the buyer accepts the property in its condition at the commencement date. The buyer's waiver and acceptance are subject to any other agreements between the parties. Basically, that's saying is you can't live in the house and find things wrong and then walk away. That's not how that works. So, and only change their dates after that. Okay, next up. Additional provisions addendum was slightly changed. Time being, that's being is being removed. This septic system installation, this line has been changed because this form was only to be used with the 2T. Well, now it can be used with a 12T as well. So that's taken out. So this agreed upon additional provisions can include the septic system installation modification. So before you could only use this form for a 2T only, but now you can use it for other forms. Like on a land, you could have an additional provisions on a land piece for installation of the septic system. So, and other than dates, that is the only change on that one. Let's see. Agreement to amend contract. This big paragraph is added. So one thing I'm seeing in compliance, you can amend as many times as needed to a contract. You just need to number it each time you make an amendment. So I'm seeing always number 1, or I'm seeing this blank, or I'm seeing it not go, this is amendment 1, amendment 2, amendment 3, amendment 4. So that blank is to be filled in. Red box, which is always a warning, including a lender and settlement agent, must be provided a copy of this amendment. This big fat paragraph here, an additional buyer. This is much like the boyfriend, girlfriend, 2 names, whatever, not on the loan. By signing this amendment, this new name is added to the contract as an additional buyer and will be included in the definition of buyer in the contract. The additional buyer named in this paragraph agrees to be obligated to all terms and conditions of the contract, including any amendments or the addenda thereto, entitled to all rights, privileges given to the buyer in the contract. Any party currently named as buyer in the contract will continue to be fully obligated and is not released from contract by the seller. Every party to the contract, as well as this additional buyer named, must sign this amendment for it to be effective. So you would say amendment 1, give it to the lender and the settlement agent, check this box, insert a name, and then all parties would sign it on page 2. Buyer, seller, LLC, or corporation if it exists. So
the lender's good with just this amendment not then being on the offer to purchase.
Yep. Yep, makes it easier.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
yep, only change on that one. 10T, this is a brand new one. So let me talk you through this one a little bit. I don't want you to be confused, but it's about estates and how they can be a little challenging with heirs in estates. So let me shrink it. So this is a warning, red box is warning. Agents are strongly advised to consult with the attorney before entering into agency relationship with any estate. Big fat bold letters, deceased people cannot own real property. So if Tammy passes away, I can't say Tammy Corey as the seller. Tammy she's passed. She can't own property. So the name of a deceased person should not appear in an agency agreement, disclosure, or contract. The name seller should never be, for example, the estate of. The seller should instead be the name of the individual executor, administrator, beneficiary, trustee, or heir. If no will exists, an agent should use this guide in conjunction with counsel to determine who has the interest. So I'm going to walk you through how this reads. So you start here. Number one, was the property owned by joint tenants with rights of survivorship or tenants by entirety? This takes you back to real estate school. Tenants by entirety are married, right? Tenants with rights of survivorship are heirs. So in other words, does the deceased owner's deed provide that upon death, the remaining owner automatically receives the dead owner's property? That's a yes or a no. If it's yes, you come down here to number two. We are on number one, we went to number two. If a joint tenant or tenant by the entirety spouse is living, then they are now the owners and can sell the property. If no joint tenant or tenant by the entirety spouse is living, then go to box 3. All right, let's go to box 3. Box 3 says, did the owner die with a will or without? With one, you go right. Without, you come down. So if they died with a will, the next question is the estate open or closed? If it's open, you go right. If it's closed, you go down. So if it's open, only the beneficiaries in the will, the beneficiary spouses, and the executor of the estate should be named as the seller on an agency agreement, disclosure, and contract. So back to over here, if the owner died with a will or without, without one, is the estate file open or closed? If it's open or closed, you either go closed or you go open. If it's closed, either the beneficiaries in the will or the heirs and their spouses should be named in the seller agency agreements, disclosures, and contracts. The administrator of the estate should not be named on this one if it's closed. Same thing here. If it's closed over here with a will, same concept. Closed comes to this box either way. And the administrator of the estate of a closed property is not to be named. If it's still open, only the heirs of the deceased, the heir spouses, and the administrator should be named at the seller or all agency agreements, disclosures, and contracts. So does that help visually what to do with an estate? I hope you say yes. Page 2 of this goes into more detail. If there are any benefit, step 1, number first question. If there is a beneficiary or an heir under the age of 18, or if any of the sellers has a guardian, regardless of their age, do not use this chart. Just stop where you are. Consult an attorney for further instructions. So if they're under 18 or have a guardian, the state says they have to have representation. So that's where you stop immediately. That's question 1. Remember, the estate administration process can take a little longer than a typical transaction. Agents need to have an understanding of all the steps involved in estate administration before entering into agency agreements about estate properties. So then there's a series of questions. Is anyone under 18 or has a guardian? That's first. Number 2 is, where's the property located? Number 3 is, where did the person that owned it reside? So whoever the descendant is, where does the descendant reside? Forgive me. Then who is on the deed itself? And did the descendant have a will? Is the descendant's estate opened or closed? Is there a mortgage still on the property? So those are all questions that you need to get into before you even get started. So you have a great understanding of where you go in this flow chart. Here's another one. It's a biggie. The spouse of any owner must, that's not mean it's an option, must sign the deed and should be added to all agency agreements, disclosures, and contracts. Here's the kicker to this sentence: regardless of whether the owner is an heir or a beneficiary named in the will. So the spouse of any owner has to sign if that owner is an heir or a beneficiary named in the will. Spouses of estate administrators or executors don't need to be named. So hypothetically, the Corey, I'm the executor for the Corey estate. It's open. I have to be named on the contract as the executor and all the heirs, but my spouse does not have to be named on that because I'm an executor of that, not my spouse. Executors are individuals. Heirs, if the married, are two people. So, while the spouse must sign the deed and lien waiver, proceeds will go directly to the beneficiary heirs or the estate as applicable, and not to the spouse that signs. So the spouse is required to sign, not that they're getting proceeds. The proceeds happen to however the estate is set up, but they are still required to sign it. In order to keep inherited property as a separate property, beneficiaries or heirs should be careful not to commingle those properties. So, estates being administered in a state or county different than where the property is located. So I had this scenario with my own transaction last month. So the owner, she passed away. She owned property in North Carolina. She owned property in Maryland. She actually passed away in Maryland. Well, North Carolina didn't know she passed away. So until the executor of the estate in Maryland actually contacted North Carolina and filed the right paperwork to let them know she was deceased, we couldn't sell the property because North Carolina had no record of her passing, and she didn't pass away here. So they had to register in the county where the property was located her will. And then that, once that was recorded, had a stamp of the clerk, then we could move forward. So it took a little bit more. And again, that's what happens if the property is here, but they pass away somewhere else. So, and again, it's got to be in the county where the property is located. So just remember that part. If it's been left in a trust, the trustee must provide a certificate, and that's North Carolina law. That's not Jason law, KW law. It's not NC Realtor law. It's North Carolina legislative law. The seller signs a contract and dies. We've actually had this happen. So Tammy's got a property. I'm her agent. We sign it. It's on the market. And Tammy passes away. Well, Tammy's intention was for that to be on the market and to sell. So if you die prior to closing, you're to allow the estate administrator to sign the deed without the joinder of beneficiaries or heirs. However, the title company may require the estate file be opened for that deceased owner. So that contract doesn't stop because the person passed away. It was already in place. Estate forms can be found at the North Carolina court system at this web address. Powers of attorney expire when the principal dies, so therefore POAs are not sufficient to convey real estate property. So again, here's the disclaimer that North Carolina nor NC Realtors make no representation of legal validity or adequacy of this form. Always consult a North Carolina attorney before entering into agency. I hope this helps. This to me is a great example of what to follow, how, when, and those kind of things. So much better than what we had before, because we had nothing. Questions on this one before we move on? All right, keep it going. I know while you're all here, you want to hear about the lawsuits and settlements and how we're going to do that. That's kind of next up. The vacant land and lot. The biggest change here, there is a new land disclosure statement Much like the residential property disclosure, there's now a land. So under the 12T, if they've not received that land disclosure within 3 days of an offer, they can get out of that offer. So let me bring it up for you so you can see.
Jason,
Yep,
when does that go into effect?
July 1st. Here's the date. Here's the being taken out. No big changes, date change. Here you go. Due diligence. Same thing as before. It's a date or it's a number of days after signing, after execution. Date change, bottom corner. Here you go. Zoning, government regulation, government compliance. Same thing as before. An investigation of whether the property is in violation of any law, ordinance, permit, or government regulation as outlined. Very same situation. Wetland and water added just like the other. No new news there. We talked about it on the other document. A date change, bottom right. Being removed, date change. Then here's your vacant land disclosure. Much like it asks you on a 2T, did you receive this? You're going to say yes or no. If they have not received one, prior to making the offer, they have a right to terminate or withdraw without penalty, including due diligence, to the end of the 3rd calendar day of the date if they haven't received it.
So, what is
There
this?
are no other changes on this form.
Jason, can I ask a question?
Yep.
Okay, it's what, June 25th today? If we're getting ready to list a lot, do we
Yep.
go ahead and use that form, or do we have to wait till July 1st?
No, you can go ahead and use it. I don't know if it's uploaded yet or not, but I would recommend you use it just to save yourself some time
Well,
and headache.
where do I get it if it's not uploaded?
NC Realtor forms, ncrealtor.org. Log in, top right corner, click login. Once you log in, it's usually your NERDS number. Usually it's a 9-digit, and then whatever your password is. And if you do in the search bar forms, and I'll log into mine so y'all see how to get there. You can search forms and it should come up.
Okay, but and if I chose not to do that and it hadn't sold by July the 1st, would I have to go in then and put it in that form?
You do. Yep.
You do.
Yep. If it's not sold by July 1st, you got to have this.
So what about if you have a contract, property under contract?
If it's under
And-
contract, you already before July 1st, you do not have to follow this.
Okay.
Good question. Possession, this is one of the others, and transferable amenities and services, including mailbox keys. Y'all, some of these places are charging like $300 for the mailbox key. And
Yeah.
sellers aren't leaving them for the new people, which is crazy. But just know that. And I think that is it. Yeah, everything else is done. So
Oh, okay, you're in 12T, which is the land offer.
I was. Yes. And that literally right there is for the synopsis of what changes they made. Guidelines, how to fix it, how to fill it out. Okay, right to sell listing. This is about basically the current lawsuit situations and the verbiage we had to change. What I think you will find is we really didn't have to change a whole lot to how we paid and how we did, because North Carolina's had buyer agency. Yes, Keenan, it will. North Carolina's had buyer agency and listing agreements for years as separate contracts. There were only 18 states in the country that had buyer agency. So you can imagine you had 32 states out there that were doing their own thing. So we were years ahead of other associations as a state. So our forms and contracts are pretty solid. Right to sell listing agreement, again, comments are in blue, informational. And then warnings are in red. So no date changes, no date, no change. One thing I am finding, even on an offer to purchase, and I should have said this on the 2T, we need more information than just an address. like make sure there's some legal, either the PIN number, the legal description, a plat book, something in here that can marry these two, the address and something government married together. The reason I say that is literally I've been at an attorney's office trying to fix a typo because we were there to sell 123 Main Street, but somebody typed in 1235. And because the attorney had been doing the file on the wrong address because of a typo, and the agent was lazy and didn't fill out the box, we accepted the contract and didn't say, hey, I need this filled out. And I don't care if you blame me, say your BIC won't pass through compliance with, halfway filled out paperwork. Don't say it as sharp as I would, but don't just leave this stuff blank, please. Fixtures. These are warnings. Don't assume any item will not be included in the sale based on oral written statements. No changes here. This is a listing agreement again. So see, you've still not seen a change, and we're on page 3.
Hey,
Personal
are water
property.
fountains that are just plugged into an electric socket a fixture?
If it's plugged in, it's not
But
a
if it's
fixture.
connected to water, maybe.
If it's a hose that's to an outlet, no. But if it's a water line that's ran to it, I would say yes.
Yeah, okay.
It's connected. But again, I would make sure you write it in there. No changes here. Right here, firm's compensation is not a change for us. What is strictly being held to now is these 2 boxes have to be a number. It can't be as stated. It can't be per the MLS. It can't be, there is no fee in MLS anymore. That's been removed. So this has to be a number. You can't say anything but a number goes here. That's all it, no letters, no NA, no nothing.
And that's
Yes.
combining the buyer's fee, agent, and yours, correct? So say it's 3 and 3, you put 6% there, correct?
Correct. You would put 6 here. The firm, if they agree to pay both sides, you would do 6 here. If you charged a flat fee, say it was a piece of land, you're charging 5,000 flat, you just say $5,000. You put the fee there. Here is where business entity, if a business or corporation of entity interest into the partnership corporation is transferred by merger or outright purchase in lieu of the sale of property, applicable law does not prohibit the payment of the fee or other compensation in connection with sale of this. So basically, say a company buys something, it buys a property that's being listed already, or takes over a corporation that owns this property, that doesn't prohibit the payment of those fees or compensation that are out there. The big thing here is an additional compensation. So anytime what's being paid is different than whatever number you hit here, if you enter 6 and you're getting 7, they have to agree in writing, and I'll show you the new form, to that you can get that compensation. If they don't agree to it, you are not allowed to keep it. Because it
So why
says
would you put that in that first block?
because they wanted it separate to stand alone to be more powerful. So if any additional compensation, incentive, bonuses, or rebates, consideration, those are additional compensations, is offered to the firm under any other party or person in connection with the sale of the property, the firm shall timely disclose that. The promise of expectation of receiving that additional compensation is in writing before the seller accepts the offer and they consent.
So was that something like what Keystone offers us
Yep.
agent into? Okay,
Yep.
sometimes.
Yep. Usually you see this more on the buyer side. You don't see it on the seller side. It's often like a bill offering a spiff, or say agent bonus if offers brought before the end of the month, that kind of thing. That's when you see this. So, so it's Form 770, and it can be used for buying or selling either side. You have to obtain consent for the additional compensation. While
From
we're
the
on that,
seller? Oh, well, the seller's the one offering it.
Yeah, the seller offers it. If it's more than what you have in the blank, they have to agree. We have to stop saying commission. You can see it struck out right there.
So it's
We-
compensation.
It's compensation. You are being compensated for the work you do. You're not earning a commission.
That's
You are,
crazy. isn't it?
you are being paid for the work you perform. So,
This
um,
Jason,
title,
what'd you say,
Jason, I have
Pete?
a quick question.
Yeah, sure, Laura, what's up?
If we have buyers or sellers who have signed agreements, but they're not under contract yet, or on the listing side, they are not listed in the MLS yet, should we go ahead and resend the forms with these new ones, or are those okay for now?
If they're going to be in live before July 1st, you do not have to, but if it's after July 1st for them to go in, you might as well use these. You
Okay,
can
thank
use
you.
either form for 60 days, neither one are wrong. My recommendation is you just go ahead and use the right forms for 24.
Okay,
It's less headache. Yes.
thank you.
Yep.
does this include, when we have to disclose the extra compensation, does this include heritage title and,
Yeah. Yes.
okay,
If they what they've signed is the disclosure, but see, usually you don't receive direct money from Heritage Title. Heritage Title is what we use that money for the office. What the office does with those, what we get from Heritage Title, is that's what pays for our summer cookout. It pays for our year-end celebration. It pays for awards banquet. Like that money's where that money goes. So if we're not selling Heritage Title and we're not using them, there's no money for those programs. So
yeah, but got that, but I just wondered if we have to disclose.
yeah,
Getting
you
money.
would if you accept it. Like if you get a bonus from a home warranty company, yes, they would have to agree to that payment. So big bold letters F, and this is going to be on both the buying side or selling side. The amount, format, and rate of real estate compensation, you notice it's not commission, is not fixed by law and is set by each broker individually and is fully negotiable. So you will see on the, well, actually you see it. This is the same boxes. This is not different. This is where they agree or don't agree to share compensation with the other side of the transaction. What I would say to your sellers would be something like this. If you don't want to pay that, I completely understand. I hear what you're saying. I will say to you that historical data we do not have for sales in your area without paying or agreeing to compensate the other side. You are more than welcome. All of this compensation is negotiable. I will say that houses with the history of agreeing to compensate the other side of the transaction usually has X number of days on market, X amount over at listing price, that kind of thing. So the history of sales is with compensation that is shared. It is not with one-sided or the other. But if they don't want to pay it, they don't want to pay it. It's perfectly fine. So, big fat initials. Don't gloss over this. Seller understands that cooperating compensation is not a requirement. They have no obligation to offer that. Although you would recommend it, and it may hinder the sale of their property, you don't know if it will or it won't.
Well, on page 1 or whatever page it's on, when we've already discussed they're going to give us 5 or 6%, that's when I go into, 2.5 or 3% for the buyers, and they agree to that 5 or 6 then. So they're just confirming it here, in my opinion.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Like I charge 6%. I do not keep all of that.
Yes,
Of that 6%,
I'd like
this
to.
much goes to the other side, blah, 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 blah. That's how my
Yeah.
conversation goes. So, but again, this is negotiable. And they need to understand that. That's the whole premise of the lawsuit. No changes, date, no changes, no changes, date. Earnest money. Now you can see that it's been added that a firm does or does not maintain trust account to hold earnest or due diligence, back to what Allison asked. So technically, Keller Williams does not have a trust account, so we do not maintain. But if, like, you could wire due diligence to the attorney, just like her question was. So that's why that's been added. All right. This one, any due diligence fee will be paid either to the seller named or to the party that the seller is naming right here. So in that 2T example where we made the due diligence payable to someone else, this is where the seller dictates who that other party is. And as a listing agent, you share in your comments that due diligence is to be made payable to attorney of record or, whatever, whoever, the executor, Jason Scott, for the, Corey.
You're gonna kill me
Corey
yet, aren't
Davis.
you?
Yep. So that's where they name where it goes. The firm agrees to direct any potential buyer in writing to make that fee payable as requested. So no changes. Flood, same thing. We added wetlands and flood disclosures. This they broke apart. It used to read like this: this property is or is not. That's all gone. And it's now a question, yes or no. The property is, yes or no, is located partially in a federal, state, or local flood hazard. Yes or no, the property is affected by other water or riparian issues, such as creek, buffer, wetland. If so, provide detail. Yes or no, the seller does not currently main, either they do or they do not. Yes or no. That's it. They broke this up into questions, individual, rather than what it was before. I think that might be it on this. Oh, lied to you. Relocation company. Question now is, are you working with a relocation company? You will also see that on the buying side. Is that buyer working with a relocation company? You have to say yes or no to that one. And who we need to work with. Oh, this one, while we're here, I see this all over the place. Dual agency. This is a question. Dual agency or not? Yes or no? One or the other. This is the line in the sand. Dual agency means they agree to work with Keller Williams. Then, do they agree to work with you for both sides? Or they do not agree to work with you for both sides? That is a question. If they do agree for you to work with both sides, that's where this stops. Initial, checkbox, stop. If they do not, initial, does not, and checkbox, and then initial. Often I see these conflicting all kinds of ways, and we're sending those back in compliance. So just FYI. I think that's it. Yep, that's it. That's listing agreement. You can see compensation didn't change other than initialing, yes, I understand it's negotiable, and that nothing is fixed. Listing agreement, right to sell listing agreement, vacant lot. It's got the same changes that the property, the residential has. Seller net sheet has a slight changes, nothing major there. I'm just going to show it to you real quick. The settlement date's been added. Because see, based on the settlement date, some of these estimations will change and the prorations of like taxes. So that's why the date may change their proceeds. This prepayment for penalty on loans, you usually don't know what that is, so you will check it out. A VA required fee, they took that out. They did add less to due diligence because people forget, oh wait, I got that up front. So I got $10,000. Why do I owe them 10,000? Because you got to take out how much that is. So, and that's the changes there. Okay. Vacant land disclosure statement. This is a new one. You've never seen it before in your life. I'm getting ready to show it to you. It looks much like the old RPD. It's the property, buyer, seller. And it says it's required. It's not an option. These are yes, no, or not reps. So They go through this 4 pages of questions,
Oh,
yes, no, or not rep, and
gosh.
and then they sign the end. So I'm surprised there's not initials on each page. I may put that back to them. That's odd for us not to have initials on every page. So anyway, that's the new disclosure for land, and it'll be in your DocuSign files shortly. Just know it's a requirement, and if they don't have it within 3 days, they can walk away and get their money back. Closing guideline for sellers. This is a brand new one too, and I'm excited about this one. It actually is a checklist for your seller. Like it says to leave your utilities on
Yeah.
through closing. Note, closing may be delayed for up to 7 days. You must have those utilities on through the delay. Maintain the lawn, pool, and exterior landscaping. You can't stop mowing the yard because it's under contract. Don't terminate your insurance until it's recorded. Fixtures, unpair any devices, remove fixtures. Prior to final walkthrough, have your property out. Like this is a great list.
Mhm.
There's nothing for them to sign. I would add a signature at the bottom just to cover me that, hey, we talked about this and you've seen it. But I think this is I'm excited about having this one. So I hope y'all are too.
They like things in writing.
Yep, sure do. No questions. If you both signed off on it and we agreed to it, it's in writing. All right, buyer agency. That's another biggie. This all used to be a nice little paragraph, but they've broken it up into questions. So it's a buyer agency between the buyer and the firm. It's not you as an individual, it's the firm. But these questions are broken out now. The buyer is not a party to buyer representation agreement with any other firm. The buyer has received a copy of working with agents. Let me reread that. Buyer has received a copy of working with agents. That's where y'all, I see, mess up. They'll check the box, yeah, you got it, and they never received anything. So, and has reviewed it with the firm. The buyer has disclosed to the firm information about any parties of the described paragraph 1 below that the buyer has visited at any open house or that the buyer has been shown by another firm. Because now, starting August 17th, you cannot take a buyer into a property without a signed agreement.
Really?
They have to have one before you can even show it.
Jason, is there a
So
form for that?
it's this one if they hire you to work with them, or the next one I'll show you right after this.
Okay.
So Jason, you said August 17th. That's not July. It's not July. It's August 17th.
That's right, Chris. I mean, we're probably going to go ahead and implement it because there's no reason to wait. I will tell you the MLSs are already removing compensation off because there's no, I mean, you're not going to be held legally liable, but this form starts on July 1st. So I can tell you that North Carolina's thinking you're going to go ahead and start this now.
You mean the MLSs are going to take off the compensation?
It will not be on there, correct?
And Jason, you said this form is going to start on July 1st, not August 17th.
August.
Starting August 17th, per the settlement agreement, you cannot show anyone a house without some kind of agency agreement.
We need to start advertising.
It's either going to be this one or the next one I show you after this, but that's your choices, this one or the next one.
Well, this is the one to go with.
Yeah, this is the one that you has a start and end date for 6 months, a year, whatever you agree to. But if they've been to an open house at another firm, this is where they disclose it. They say, look, I showed a house with, Mary Sue over at AT's, but I didn't sign. I'm not with an exclusive. The next one is called a non-exclusive.
Oh,
So exclusive buyer agency agreement. So, and if they're working with a relocation company, this is where that goes. Anything
you there?
You went away.
Period. One house.
We couldn't hear you.
Or, it says the internet's unstable. Am I with you? Y'all with me?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can hear
Yes,
you.
we got you now.
What you were saying.
Yeah. The internet flickered. It said it was weak. But you can, this can be an agreement for one single address. So if I'm required to have an agency to go into a house before I show it, I could say other 123 Main Street, and I can show it to you. I'll say the question popped up on Facebook, like, what about an open house? Well, no one's hired you at the open house to work for them. So you're really a sub-agent of the seller. So you don't, if you're a seller, sub-agent, then you're working for the seller. You don't have to have an agreement. So they can come. So you do not have to have this until they agree to hire you, to work with you over a period of time to find them a property, or they hire you to show them, they agree to pay you something if they agree to move forward with this house. So big changes here. Fee, compensation of the firm. This has to be, and it says, do not insert NA, do not zero, do not arrange, don't a dollar amount. It has to be a numerical dollar amount, a specific percentage, or a flat dollar amount, one or the other. That's not a phrase or alphabet, nothing, numbers right there. Part of this sentence is, all this is stricken out. So the firms may seek the fee from a cooperating listing firm or from the seller, and the buyer agrees, that firm shall be entitled to receive same in consideration for their services hereunder, provided that any compensation paid by a cooperating firm or seller shall not exceed the amount of the fee. So what if I put 3% right here, and they're paying 3% with $1,000 bonus? You didn't agree to $1,000 bonus on this. So you either need to update page 1, or you need to do that 770 agreement to compensation, where they consent for you to be paid more than this number. You cannot vary from this number, period, without 770 agreeing for the variation. Does that help?
Jason,
Yes.
a question when we're making out a listing and it shows up on the MLS, can we put in private remarks
No.
where to go to find out what your cooperative fee was?
No. Nope. Nothing. You can't private remark. You can't make an attachment. You can't. Anywhere MLS, you cannot have that posted. Now, that being said, several MLSs across the country are adding a box for concessions. And a concession from the seller can be 3% of the price, or a fee, or an amount. So if a concession is listed in the MLS, that is not compensation. That is a concession provided by the seller for this property that can be used to compensate the buyer. Because see, again, the buyer themselves are the ones that have to pay the agents now. So if they got a 3% concession from the seller and decided to use that money to pay the buyer, that is a concession. It is not compensation to the agent.
So are our MLS allowing these concession statements?
I have not heard the word from Triad yet, Beth. Triangle is adding it. So whatever, and like, you can go on Facebook and say, look, 123 Main Street is giving 3% concession. That is not the MLS. You cannot have it in the MLS, is what the lawsuit is. But now if you go to Facebook and say it's a 3% concession to buyer's agents, that's perfectly fine. What you
And
can't do in that post is then link it back to the MLS.
can you say in the MLS, see my website for compensation information?
Nope. You can't say the word compensation on the MLS.
How about for more information?
I would just steer clear of it. It's just, yeah. Anything other than, yeah, the word compensation or commission or anything is being removed all over the country. So,
And Jason, can you just go back up for a second?
yeah, of course.
Yeah, where you mentioned about the buyer agrees the firm fee, the services, in the amount of for the percentage.
Yep.
And you said you can't put a range of compensation. I know at one time when we first was talking about this, we were going 3% for improved.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, Chris, and you bring a good question, and I've seen several of you do this. Like you say, and that's what it says: specific percentage price, purchase price, or other methods of determining the compensation, such as type of property. So you could say 3% residential, 5% land, 2.5% new construction. Like you could break those out in severals. Yes. And I've
Okay.
seen I think you and I think the Wine Sox do that too.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay.
You could list all of them because you don't know what they're buying yet. So if they're buying vacant land, it's usually 10 and it's 5, and there's not a usual, but that's our charge. And it's 6%. And so I had an agent this morning in the class say, well, I've never seen, in one MLS it's 2.2, it's 2.4, it's 2.6, it's 3, it's all over the place. And you're exactly right. It is all over the place, but what you charge the buyer is what you put in this box. So if you say 3 in this box, and then you hit MLS, or you talk to the agent, you don't hit MLS, you talk to the agent and it's 2.2, the buyer owes you 0.8 from this. Unless you update page 1 with a lower amount, or you fill out a 770 agreement to compensation for the lower amount. Clear as mud?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, good. All right, cool.
I want to ask you something. Y'all said
yes.
something about listing for compensation somewhere else, but if on the agreement it says, I guess you're paying did you use compensation twice? Because if you use it another way in your remarks or whatever one of y'all was saying, I just felt like that was like going to be double paying or something.
Yeah, you can't say anywhere on the MLS anything about compensation or see it or do it, or
Yeah.
you can say the word concession that my
Concession,
seller's
that's what I
offering.
mean. Y'all said concession somewhere, but then compensation has already been disclosed in your agreement with them. And then if you say,
So in the listing agreement, so in the listing agreement, say they offer a 3% concession to the buyer's agent, right? When you go to list it, you would say under concession, 3% of purchase price.
And that won't get confused with compensation as well.
Because a concession is paid or given to the buyer themselves.
Oh, okay, I'm
And
following
see,
you.
then the buyer is in charge of what they pay per this line you enter. So that's
I
where
gotcha.
compensation and concession are not the same.
Jason, remind me in Triangle, we are inputting a listing. Remind me of where concessions is.
It's being added.
Oh.
So it's not there yet. But it'll be under probably property, it'll be under the last tab under details.
Okay.
I'm not trying to get around anything. Can you put the compensation in showing instructions and showing time?
No. Yep. It can only be on your own website or your own personal advertising. KWs, and see where do they get that information, like on Zillow and Realtor and My Dog Test and all those other, any Fathom and Redfin, they get it from the MLS. So that's fed through IDX. So therefore, those feeds of those properties will not have compensation listed. because they can't. But the agreement and lawsuit is about the MLS. So if you somewhere else advertise 3% for 123 Main Street, that is not the MLS. You can do that. You cannot put it in comments. You can't link it. You can't put in instructions. You can't. That's all MLS related. All these are good questions. I'm glad you are asking.
Jason, Keenan did ask a question in chat that I also want to know. As
So then,
now,
as of right now, do we know if the seller is going to? We do not know. Therein lies part of the issues that you have to contact every listing agent to say, are you offering compensation? And we know two things: realtors don't read and they don't answer their phones. So, there you go. 11 folks decided for 1.7 million people how this was to be done. So, that provided that any compensation paid by a listing firm or seller shall not exceed the amount of the fee unless otherwise agreed. So, if it's different, say you say 2.4 right here, or a buyer, your buyer can't afford it, and you agree to a 2%, they're going to pay you 2%. Well, if it's if it's advertised or conceded that they will give 3%, that's a bonus for you, right? That's great. You can't accept it unless your buyer agrees to an updated page 1 of 3% or agrees on a 770. It can be different. They just have to agree to it. So, if a buyer buys a property where compensation is offered and it's less than this fee, where no compensation is offered by either the listing firm or the seller, the buyer and firm agree the buyer will pay the difference between those fees and compensation offered unless prohibited. Prior to making an offer, the firm will inform the buyer if the compensation is offered that is less than the fee written in that box right there. Bless you. Per federal regulations, a buyer obtaining a VA loan cannot pay for brokerage fees or commission in connection with services, although they are permitted to obtain a concession. The firm will still seek compensation even if it's a VA loan. Again, additional compensation, incentive, bonuses, rebates, or other valuable consideration over and above the fee that you wrote in this box right here is offered to the firm. The firm shall disclose it with the expectation of receiving it and obtain consent before or they accept an offer on 770. Big thing about consent. You cannot accept more than what you put in that box.
So
unless
Jason,
they
can you
agree.
go into that VA loan? So you're
Yeah, that's
saying
a
that
rule right now. VA, they're not allowed to pay for certain inspections. They're not allowed to pay for commission. And see, right now, buyers for VA, currently it's on the MLS and you get paid what you get paid. Veterans are not allowed to, part of their agreement with the VA loan is veterans cannot be charged a commission. Now, we're talking here buyers. So VA loans are buyers that are veterans. They can't pay a commission, but we're saying in this box, Mr. Veteran, Miss Veteran, you owe this amount. Well, they're not allowed to legally. What they can do, though, is they can accept a concession with a VA loan, meaning it's in the loan for an amount. And that was the VA's waiving that they're calling it a concession, not compensation or commission.
How do you get confirmation it's going to be waived before you get too far in?
It's always waived. It's period. For VA, it's waived. I mean, it's not, you can't get too far in. It is waived. So
And so like,
either the seller has to do it or it can be in the loan amount and the VA pays you directly. So
I have another question, but I'll ask it when it's appropriate.
go ahead, ask away. That's what we're here
So
for.
like Keystone, they have their own offer to purchases and things like that, track builders. Is their verbiage going to be changed as well?
It should. I mean, this is an agreement between the buyer and the firm. So
Uh-huh.
this is not an offer to purchase that sees the public.
Uh-huh.
But like an offer to purchase should have some changes legally.
Yeah.
I can't imagine they're not. I would be shocked.
I talked to
Um,
one, he said, I don't know how we're going to pay y'all. And I'm like, okay.
yeah. Big fat box here. They understand the services are not free. The fee is what you put in that box. If the listing firm or the seller agree to pay the firm all or a portion of the fee, a portion of the purchase price will be paid to a listing firm who will in turn pay the firm as cooperating agent. Herein on this document, if the cooperating compensation offered is not sufficient to satisfy the fee, the buyer is obligated to pay the difference. So, initial. And here's the big thing, 770 may be used to disclose any potential additional compensation and obtain the buyer's consent. If you need to change something, you can do a 770, you can update page 1, or form 220, you can adjust the compensation rate. So any of those 3 ways work. So all good question. Took out commission, added compensation. And again, information, buyer understands and acknowledges that there is potential for a conflict of interest generated by a percentage of price based fee for representing a buyer. The amount, format, rate of real estate compensation is not fixed by law, but is set by each broker individually and is fully negotiable. That's the whole premise of the lawsuit. This right here, acknowledge the receipt of a sample copy of OTP and a contract and a sample copy of Pro Services. Just saying, y'all just check that and keep it moving. Same thing here, they're chicken dual agency, either or not. This means KW. If they say KW and you, that's initial and does, and nothing else. Stop right there. If they do not agree to you do both, it's initial, it's check, and it's initial. So it's all 3 if it's KW and not you doing both and initials. And I just heard a great example of that. It's like having an attorney represent the prosecution and the defense in court. That makes sense to me. Do I hire the same attorney to work on both sides? No, I don't. So very interesting. It's a way you could explain
I do a divorce lawyer.
it. And I think that's it. Yay, 7 pages. Used to be 5. And we're going to end soon. It's about, I got about 5 minutes. Next is that non-exclusive one that it's been out there for years, 203. It's not new. It's only 5 pages. And this is one meaning I'm not exclusively working with you. I might be working with other agents. But before I can show you a house, if you don't want to hire me for a period of time and solely work with me, and you still want to work with other people, but for me to show you this house, we have to at least have this. Now, there is another form that got put out by a national search engine that rhymes with Twillo. That form is not an approved state document. That form does not cover you in North Carolina. So these 2 forms are the only 2 forms that cover you. Non-exclusive or exclusive, 203 or 5. So it's between parties, the property. You put in the address they're going to go see, how long it's going to work for. Then same thing, compensation to the firm, obtain their consent, obtain consent. Compensation is earned, not necessarily paid. Compensation is not fixed by law. It's fully negotiable. You acknowledge receiving an offer to purchase, questions and answer on inspections, and pro services. This is real. This form has been out there forever. It talks about agency. This is just a non-exclusive one. So you have to have one of these two to show someone a house, unless you are hosting an open house. For an open house, the only thing you have to have is a WWRA form for folks that come in. So that covers that one.
They have to have a WWREA to step in an open house?
Pete, I would say that if you're going to have any dialogue other than my name's Pete, I'm a realtor, and then they start to talk, you have to have a WWRA, because inevitably that's first substantial contact. They've not hired you, but you have to describe who agency is in North Carolina. Because the moment they say, "Oh, nice to meet you, Pete. This is Jason. He's looking for a house," you automatically go into, and you're too far in to do WWRA. You should have done it already. So you might as well have them sign it and explain it when they enter. Okay, 220 has been changed. It used to be called the confirmation of compensation. It is now called cooperating compensation.
We're lawyers.
Yep, and you see how much has been struck out. You see all this? All that's gone. It's now called cooperating compensation. Use this instead of if with an unrepresented seller. And you see bold, bright, dark, all caps screaming at you, do not upload this form to the MLS. Do not upload this form to the MLS. It's between a seller and a buyer, and what is the property? This is the fee that the seller or the firm agrees to pay. This is the percent. If it's a percent, if it's a fee dollar amount, it's here, or other. Like this is if I have a for sale by owner, and I want to guarantee I'm going to get paid, I have to fill this out. But whatever you do not upload this form. Payment of the fee is rendered at time of signing the written contract for the sale of property. During the term of this agreement, the fee will be due and payable upon the firm or the buyer authorized under contract once it settles the purchase of the property right there. The fee will be paid at closing as defined under the contract unless otherwise agreed. The term shall be expired as of this date you enter. So you got to put in a date. Mergers, assignments, enforcements, and government, meaning if I buy Corey properties, I still owe the commission on this property. Like just because I bought Tammy's company doesn't mean I don't have to pay the commission or the compensation. So these are all new. Dates, listing firm, date selling firm, date seller, date buyer. So all these are new boxes. So this is the new cooperating compensation. So that's for someone who is not have an agent on the other side, not represented by a licensed agent right there. Line 1. Okay. Likewise, you would use that if needed for the flip too. You know, you're paying not a buyer that's not represented. That's been totally changed. Guidelines for that has been suspended. Termination. This one's a biggie. Y'all get out of your trees, and buyer and seller get out of their trees when someone terminates. But if they terminate before 5 o'clock on the day of due diligence, it's unilateral notification. And that would be the end of that sentence. They get their earnest money back. The contract says that, the termination says that. It doesn't matter. They get their money back if it's before 5 o'clock on day of due diligence. And here's the deal. If they do not agree with the reason they're signing it, usually that's what sellers go into their trees about. The seller, all this is out, hereby instructs the escrow agent to disperse the earnest money to the buyer. All caps, in bold, this release of earnest money shall not in any way affect the seller's right to dispute or challenge alleged grounds for termination. If it's prior to due diligence, there are no grounds that they can, there's no way out. I mean, it's over. You give them the money back. That's where people don't, they get, like we've got one literally this week. They terminated at 450 and the agent on the other side said you used the wrong firm, we keep the $5,000. No, they notified you before 5 o'clock they were terminating. That's during due diligence period. So this is easy to understand. Next up, termination for a vacant lot, same concept. It's same edits were made. Termination of urgent agency agreement. There is one small edit to it. If you are not going to represent that party, often you all want to be repaid because they terminate. I want to get paid for my pictures I paid for. I want to get paid for my measurements. If we're terminating, I want immediately execution of this termination expenses in the amount of X. You used to have to provide receipts. Well, you don't have to do that now, but they may not agree to this. What I would recommend to you, if you're going to ask for an early termination fee or an expense reimbursement fee if they terminate, put it in the additional part of the listing agreement. So it's not a
Under
surprise.
other or something
Yep,
like that.
under other, yep, additional.
That's what I do, because
Instead of popping with them at the termination and say, "Oh, you owe me for this," that's kind
Yeah.
of a surprise party. Don't do those kind of things. It's
make it
here,
painful.
and you can ask for it, but it don't mean you're getting it. Put it in the listing agreement so they know it up front. One small change there. We got that. Okay. Compensation. Referral agreements, real easy. It's about selling prospects property, not for the closing of prospects property occurring on before the date, blah, blah, blah. So they've struck out a lot of that. Time of payment, however, is within this date, within so many days. So slightly changes there to referrals, nothing major. And I promise we're near the end. Pro services, they've added sewer inspections as a standard list of one of the services. That's being more and more prevalent in inspections. Disclosures of compensation. This is a NAR settlement, that's 770. And we talked about it a gazillion times. Here's what it actually looks like. So it's either or buying or selling, either side, it doesn't matter. I'm disclosing for this address, buyers of this or seller and this firm, I'm disclosing by law that in connection with the sale of property that's purchased, the firm expects to receive the following compensation: this money or this percent, non-money or whatever you're getting, received from at the value of X. This is where the firm signs it, your agent signs it, and this is where they consent. Right here.
Do this with every transaction?
If it's you are receiving money different than what you fill in the blank.
Oh, I gotcha.
So
And
So you
that's
put 6% on, go ahead.
and that amount would only be the difference from the two, or
correct.
okay.
Because it's in the amount that's different than you agreed to. Yes. Good question, Chris. All right, and I think it's the last one. This one, if you use a new construction, the 800T, that offer to purchase for new construction has been completely deconstructed and rebuilt. I will show it to you, but I'm not going over it because I'm getting ready to show it, and you're going to be like, "What the what? Look, I mean, it's pages and pages of edits.
So the yellow's just strikeout stuff.
Yellow and lines are strikeouts. Yellow
Yeah.
can be additions. Like
I
they
see.
added unless checked, not applicable. But when you use this form, it's for usually it's local builders that are not so far into the project. that they're not going to use a 2T. Like this is about the ratings of their insulation. It's like in their builder warranties in here. There's all kinds of things in here. So, and most of your chains and national brands already have a form, but if it's usually local builders that use the North Carolina form in conjunction with an agent, this is the form they would use if it's a new construction. But this is not one that is a everyday use in and out. You're going to use the 2T. So
What if it's new construction, it's already built?
yeah, see, if all this is already built, it's a 2T.
Okay.
Because you're not going into a lot of these questions and answers. So this, see,
But what
this
if they
is,
want a builder's warranty, that 1 year thing, then what do you do?
see,
And they're
like
willing
this.
to do it.
That's fine. You just give it to them in writing. Two parties can agree on anything in writing.
Oh, okay.
So whether and how much the construction fees are costly, they refund the fees, substantial completion. Like there's a lot of within 14 days of substantial completion. Like there's a lot of stuff in here. This is one that is not built yet, that does not have their own contract. So, and that's it. So what questions do you all have that I might not have answered? Are you feeling easy about? Or anything else?
I think you did good.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And look, I've not used this form either. It's new to me. So I just sit through the training and classes. You did ask me, which I will do for you. One more thing. I want this to move. If I go to ncrealtors.org, I log in this my account upper right corner, and I'm already logged in, so that's why it's already there. But this would say log in if you're not logged in, and you log in. But I enter site, I do forms, and then I search. So if I want to see 2T or termination or whatever, like if I want to see the 2T and I want to search it, it's going to come up, and this is 2T offer to purchase. So any form you need, if you can't find a form, it's here, ncrealtors.org. And a lot of people get confused about, wait, I went to the commission website and I couldn't see the form, because the commission doesn't create forms. They create licenses. So any form you need is in NC Realtors. So that's a part of what you pay to be in a part of an association and NAR. So if you don't pay for the association, then you don't have access to these forms. So
And what did you go to get to forms and contracts?
ncrealtors.org, and
Yeah.
this drop down.
Oh, I got you. I see them now.
Just choose it right there. Yeah.
Because it
all
used to
those
be
Monday, all those Monday legal Q&As that come out every week, you can search them right here.
Oh,
Every Monday they put one out Monday morning every week, and usually I post it for you on the Facebook
yeah.
page. If I just search Q&As, it'll come up to all the ones that have ever been made. Like here's the August 2020. Do I have a seller's look? Like there's been 82 about forms, 34 about law and rules, disclosures, agency, all kinds of stuff. So, anyway, great site, ton of information. Let me stop share. All right, y'all need me for anything else?
No, one last question. And this training,
Yes, sir.
This training has been recorded, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you.
Yep. And there's still more classes. Like tomorrow's a hybrid. I'm doing a Zoom and in live person. Some folks wanted to see it on the screens. So we're doing it Zoom. We're doing it on the screens live and in person. And we got three or four more classes. And then I'm going to same class in live.
Oh.
So if you wanted to come and sit in the room and watch me do the same thing, we'll do it. But yeah, there's another hybrid class and another Zoom class. And also we'll be sharing with you the links to watch the North Carolina attorney, John, do it if you want to just watch him do it. Because he answers the legal hotline. So he has a lot of insight and input from why this form does this and what does it really say and why does it say that. So his videos are worth an hour. But at basic, you've seen the forms and now know what to put where. So if y'all don't need anything, I so appreciate you and I appreciate your time. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Sure thing, friend. I appreciate y'all.